Good morning. Welcome to the second virtual bench learning hosted by the European Age 2020 project DataBench. Today we have the pleasure of having two of the participants of DataBench to present some success stories on big data and analytic use cases from a specific sectors such as manufacturing and retail. Also, we will enjoy a short demonstration of the DataBench Toolbox, which is the main outcome of the project. Before starting with today's session, allow me to say a few words about the project and the series of virtual bench learnings we're organizing. The DataBench project aims to address the existing gap in the current benchmarking community's activities and goes a step further to provide relevant results and information about how specific big data technologies affect business KPIs such as revenue growth, cost reduction, customer satisfaction, among many others, while still measuring the technical performance of these tools. For this purpose, the DataBench Toolbox will provide a software tool which the industrial and research community of users from both technical and business roles can leverage to search, select, compare, and deploy multiple big data technology benchmarks, measure their performance according to their needs, and at the same time get relevant business insight in relation to their vertical. We will see the DataBench Toolbox more in depth at the final of the presentation. This session is part of a series where we will present some of the most relevant results achieved by the project. The goal of these activities is to reach out key industries and benchmarking communities in order to build synergies and create a self-sustainable interaction model to continue after the end of the project. Also, we want to invite you to test our results, so in case you're interested, please contact us. If you missed our first virtual bench learning with Gabriela Cataneo and Erika Spinoni, you can watch the recording and access the presentations on the webinar section of our website, or you can also watch them on our YouTube and SlideShare accounts. In addition, we want to invite you to the virtual workshop we will hold in collaboration with BDBA as part of the virtual workshops they are organizing. Before starting with today's session, some practical issues. This session will last approximately 45 minutes, and after that we will move on to the Q&A. If you have any question, please write them down in the chat, which is located at the control panel on the right. And at the end of the presentation, we will answer your questions. Right now, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to check which is your main interest. The first question of the poll is about your profile, so please let us know if you're more interested in technical aspects or if you're more on the business side of the application of big data and big data technologies. Wait a second. I will give you a few seconds to answer. Okay, so it seems that 54% of the audience is more interested on the technical aspects around big data and benchmarking. The second and last question is related to if you have been involved in benchmarking big data technologies and with which purpose. I'm giving you a few seconds to answer. Okay, this is the case for 44% of the audience haven't done anything related to benchmarking yet. 20% only for technical purposes, 12% only for business purposes, and 24% for both. Thank you so much for answering. At the end of the session, there's a brief survey of 2 questions to get your feedback and recommendations, and we will send you in the upcoming days the information presented today with some other interesting material. Without further delay, let me introduce our speakers. Chiara Francalanci is Associate Professor of Information Systems at Politecnico di Milano. She has a master's degree in electronic engineering, a PhD in computer science from Politecnico di Milano, and a master in management engineering from the business school of this university. Her research focuses on information systems engineering and in particular on feasibility analysis. Tomás Pariente has a bachelor's degree in telecommunication engineering by the Universidad Politécnica in Madrid. His technical expertise is mainly in artificial intelligence, big data, linked data, and knowledge management. Since June 2006, he works as a project manager and technical coordinator for European-based projects in semantic and big data technologies in the Research and Innovation Department of Atos. This is our information if you want to contact us and know more about DataBench project. Right now, I'm going to give the floor to Chiara so we can start with the session.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if you have attended the previous webinars, you already know what the general goal of DataBench is. Very shortly, let me position our research in DataBench. The main objective of DataBench as a project is to evaluate the impact of BDTs, big data technologies, on business performance. Our role is more on the analysis of how technical benchmarking can contribute to make the best technical choices, and how in turn the best technical choices can have an impact on the overall business benefits of the big data technology projects. We are in the third and last year of the project, and in the past 2 years we have started with very large scale data collection on BDT projects. We have run IDC, actually we have supported IDC in running a large survey, European level survey, and we have more than 700 collected more than 700 responses. We have run and continuously updated a very large desk analysis, collecting all the use cases that were published in the literature, and then we have analyzed 20 case studies in depth. So our results are based on these three main sources of empirical data. Well, first of all, a few insights from the survey. These are the highlights, particularly from a technical perspective. Well, first of all, the most frequent data size that companies have to deal with and that they classify as big data is gigabytes and terabytes. And mostly tables and structured data, so rather traditional data, and mostly descriptive and diagnostic analytics. So predictive and prescriptive analytics are not yet the focus of most European companies. The batch processing approach is the most common one, while streaming and real-time processing approaches are much less common. While if we, in the question where we asked, what are you planning to do in the future? They said that, there is an emerging need to integrate heterogeneous data, so to move to other types of data, not just structured and tables, but their current concern is mostly data quality. So basically it looks as if companies are still working on the data and preparing the data for future predictive and prescriptive applications. Then the desk analysis. We have collected, as I said, more than 700 use cases. Our sources are the scientific literature, but also the websites and white papers from IT providers and all the public documentation that was available from other European H2020 projects. Given this type of sources of information, if we look at the survey and look at the desk analysis, it's like, comparing mainstream versus innovation insights. In fact, the picture that comes out of the desk analysis is a bit different. First of all, in terms of data size, nobody talks about gigabytes, everybody talks at least about terabytes. They focus on streaming, processing as a paradigm as opposed to batch, and they don't talk about descriptive or diagnostic applications, but mostly predictive and prescriptive. And the most important technical performance metric seems to be throughput, so the ability to process masses of data in a very short time to support real-time decision making. So overall, what we can say is that, the picture that comes from the large-scale extensive analysis is that the actual status of BDT projects in Europe is still, rather immature at the beginning of the learning curve, but we are well aware of what the, target is, and we're moving towards that target, as suggested by the desk analysis. We've also looked at these extensive data to come up with, a table of the most common use cases by industry, which is shown in this chart. They represent the most widely cited use cases in either the literature or in the survey that we have run. These are the most frequent business KPIs that we could extract from the analysis of the large-scale survey and desk analysis. You can see that data on the business KPIs, especially quantitative data on the business KPIs, are, non-systematic. So we were unable to find systematic evidence on the values of the business KPIs. So most frequently, companies say, what is the business KPI that is impacted, but they don't provide metrics on the actual benefits. So this table summarizes what we could find, and we can see that, when we can find benefits cited, they're really quite high. So in the range of, 35% reduction of marketing costs, 35%, 80% reduction of, of maintenance costs in the automotive industry, and so on. So this is the outcome of, this table is mainly the outcome of the desk analysis. So we can see, a rather optimistic evaluations. So our first question is, well, first of all, an explanation. It's quite intuitive that this can be the case because the desk analysis focuses primarily on sources of information that look at the future or that present innovative technologies, presented by the companies that are commercializing those innovative technologies. So clearly we have a bias towards, optimism. Which is not entirely consistent with what we have found with the survey, where the overall assessment of the business benefits that can be obtained is much more cautious and is in between 5 and 8% overall. Okay, so whatever the benefit, cost reduction, ROI, etc., the benchmark is, the impact is in between 5 and 8%. So what about the case studies? We took a look, took a closer look to case studies with a very thorough methodology that has involved, a first inspection of the material that we could get from the 21 companies that we have interviewed, then an interview, then a follow-up with, more material, and then in some cases we've even been involved as observers in the in the pilots and POCs that they were running on in the BDT area. And this latter kind of involvement has been the most important one to get insights. This is the interview template that we have used for the interview step of the methodology that we have just discussed. These are the general insights. So taking a closer look to companies that have actually done, completed BDT projects, the benefits are mostly in the 4 to 8% range, which is quite consistent with the survey, and which has less optimistic compared to the literature. That is, of course, quite quite intuitive. But still, it's good to see that BDT projects have had a significant and measurable impact on overall business KPIs. We're talking about overall business KPIs, so at least process level KPIs, if not company level KPIs. So for example, as we will see, stating that a targeting application can have a 3% impact on the company profits, well, that is an important result, quite a relevant result, and it has been measured by these companies. It's interesting also to see that companies have raised, have made two comments, one on technical benchmarking, which is generally considered in our case studies as highly specialized and costly. So they have expressed a requirement, a need for a tool like the DataBench Toolbox that can, collect and systematize the knowledge that already exists on technical benchmarking, drive companies through the choice of the most suitable benchmark, and then help them roll out benchmarking initiatives to, simplify them and reduce costs. They have also pointed to several risks associated with BDT projects, primarily related to the fact that they fear that the technology that they have chosen might prove non-scalable over time. They are also concerned with the potential lock-in and with the costs of cloud solutions. So, on one hand, they often don't have this, they have scalability issues in their on-premises data center. On the other hand, they think cloud services might be too expensive, not for all applications, but for certain, applications that involve really big data. Another observation that we could gather from the case study analysis is that benchmarks are considered most useful, especially when they face the end, when they measure the performance of the end-to-end solution. So generally speaking, companies don't feel like it's the database only or the application layer only that should be benchmarked. They would really be interested in having end-to-end solutions. And this is, by the way, a trend that we have observed, emerging trend that we have observed in research, in the research, academic and also industrial research. But we couldn't find many end-to-end benchmarks, although there's work going on in that direction. Okay, this is, are the business KPIs for the case studies that we have analyzed, which we can, you can go through and see what business impact we've been able to measure in selected case studies. It's actually, as I said, it's interesting to know, to learn that some companies, the expectations of some companies was to be able to see an impact on their overall financial performance, which is actually quite an important aspect of this analysis. For example, the optimization of markdown in the fashion industry has been found to result in a 5% increase of the overall margin of the company, which is, significant. This impact of BDTs on company level financial performance is in and of itself interesting. It gives us, benchmarks that are easily transferred to other companies that embark in the same case study. And it also allows us to get a sense for the impact of IT costs on those benefits and for the potential benefits from IT benchmarking and the choice of the best IT solution on costs and hence, business benefits. So this is our next step. Let me go to one of these case studies, intelligent fulfillment in retail, which is particularly interesting from this perspective. So from analyzing the end-to-end relationship between, IT benchmarking and business benefits, which is quite a long shot. So one of the difficulties we had in this project is that it is quite challenging to go from IT benchmarking to business benefits. So this is a company operating in the retail, particularly the grocery industry, that has run a pilot to optimize assortment selection and to implement automated fulfillment at an individual shop level. So generally speaking, companies in this industry tend to make assortment decisions at a regional level instead of individual shops. So they basically cluster shops by, the geography, the geographical location of the shop, and then they run optimizations at that level. Now, they, wanted to use an automated approach to be able to run optimizations at an individual shop level, which can actually provide, significant benefits because the consumer behavior is so variable as to the point of changing at an individual shop level. So they implemented a complex AI system that included machine learning to run sales prediction. Based on sales prediction, they optimized assortment and they then implemented a day-to-day automated fulfillment. And they have piloted in one shop and measured a 5% increase of margins. What they did is actually quite a serious pilot because they, run the shop in isolation. So they tried to really measure the impact on the bottom line of the BDT project only, okay? However, they run the experiment on Spark, fully managed version of Spark on Amazon, and that would cost them about €100 per run per category per shop. Of course, the system that they have developed was non-optimized, and they can, they can work on IT costs even with the aid of IT benchmarking. But their concern is that there's hundreds of category shops and runs and costs. €100 can look like quite a small figure, but then costs add up. This is another case, a recommendation system, again in retail grocery. Again, the idea is to personalize recommendations at an individual customer level, which is rather complex, but can be done automatically. So they designed this recommendation system and they measured a 3 to 4% impact on the overall margins of their e-commerce solution. However, they were basing, most of the margin came from cross-selling recommendations. So for example, if you buy, pasta, they will, recommend pesto as a dressing for pasta. So that is cross-selling. But these tables, to be customized at an individual customer level, are really huge, can become easily huge. And they were running them on a hardware appliance, which was, they had to simplify these tables because they were too large. And then they measured that less personalized recommendations would generate 1/10 of the clicks and therefore 1/10 of the margins. So this, of course, points to potential usefulness of IT benchmarking to make the best technical choices and actually reduce costs. We have found a few examples of a tangible effect of benchmarking on cost reduction, which is number one, the choice of, it's just examples, but the choice of the top performing DB can reduce costs by an order of magnitude, data costs by an order of magnitude. This was actually the problem that we have observed in the recommendation system of the retailer. We can benchmark AI and pick an efficient multi-thread algorithm that can make good use of the processing capacity that you have on machines. And by the way, you can also choose the most convenient machine in cloud. So let's take a look, for example, the last example, the choice of the optimal cloud instance. If you go to cloud, we've taken here AWS, Amazon as an example, and we have compared costs on different systems with the same with the same overall computing capacity, and changing, of course, number of instances, number of machines in the cluster, and the choice of the machine makes a huge difference. So it can reduce costs by up to 70%. And that is really important, because of the observations that we just made, because of the incidence of costs, especially cloud costs, on the overall benefits of BDT project. So the next question we ask ourselves is this cost issue general? Can we generalize it across the most frequent use cases in the BDT area? And now we've done a lot of technical work in this respect, which I'm going to just go through, and then if you're interested, you can go to the DataBench website. We'll publish all the deliverables, or you can drop a note to the speakers and we'll be happy to respond to your questions. But what we did is basically we put a design effort to design the architecture, and we came up with this integrated architectural blueprint. So all the components that should be available to a company to be able to implement a BDT project. This has been the result of an integration, a unified view of 27 much simpler use case specific technology blueprints. Now, these blueprints can be used to then select benchmarks, because each individual component in each one of these blueprints needs benchmarking and needs a specific benchmark, which is something as you will see, the toolbox can help you with. There's dozens of benchmarks, and you really have to do two things. Well, first, understand what it is that's most critical and you need, that has the greatest impact on costs, and you need to benchmark. So the most data and processing intensive components given the use case. Number two, you have to select the proper benchmark. So for example, this is the architecture for the intelligent fulfillment use case that we have seen. And this is the assumptions that we made to do the sizing of the architecture, and this is the resulting cost of the system given different configurations on Amazon. And as you can see, costs can be divided by 4, and dividing costs by 4 with the benchmarks, cost benchmarks, and with the correct sizing of the architecture in cloud is actually quite significant, given that in this use case, the intelligence of the system and the frequency with which the system is run are so high that costs represent, a good chunk of the benefits, overall company benefits that can be, achieved with the project. Okay, so this is another use case, just a few words, then I think that my time is almost over. I have just 5 minutes. This is a use case on targeting in the telecom industry. The idea is, can I select the customers that are, potentially most interested in a campaign? And instead of contacting them by phone, is it this, targeted customer base small enough to be called by phone instead of, being just contacted with an SMS? Clearly, the effectiveness of a, call center, of an interaction with the call center is greater than an SMS or an email, but it's much more costly. So for companies with millions of customers, it is impossible to call them. So what they typically do is they call people who are not currently customers, and they send an SMS to their current customers. Since people who are not customers, it's good to invest some more money, because if you can actually get them to churn out of their current telecom provider and become client of the company, their customer lifetime value is so high that justifies a phone call, basically, in economic terms. While if you're already a customer, the customer lifetime value has already been is captive. You're captive already, and so they just send you an SMS. But that is not good for, of course, upselling and cross-selling. But they need to target. They need a targeting system to be enabled to do that. So we have worked with a telephone company. We've run a case study with them, and they have explained that by selecting out of their 5 million customers, the customers that are actually really interested in a potential campaign, they can reduce the number of phone calls that they make and increase the effectiveness of their phone call dramatically, to the point that with just a small investment of around, worst case scenario, 50K a year in a targeting system, they can achieve huge benefits. Even in this case, if you use applied benchmarking, you can reduce cut costs by a factor of 3, which is still quite, quite significant. Okay, so what we're doing now is mapping market technologies and mapping benchmarks on the components of our blueprints, so that we can use all this knowledge to drive users of the toolbox through a complex choice of, potentially useful technologies and related benchmarks. And we're also in the process of organizing all this knowledge, and all the knowledge that we have accumulated in DataBench around this knowledge base. We're doing this in cooperation with Atos, of course, but also Synteth, which is another partner of the DataBench project. Okay, so for the time being, I thank you very much. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer at the end of Atos' presentation, of Thomas' presentation. So I pass on to Thomas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara. Thank you, Anna. I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, very well.
Perfect. So far we have seen today some work done in DataBench around use cases and business KPI, some kind of blueprints, as Chiara was explaining. We had a previous webinar a month ago, more or less, with some more information about how in DataBench we are looking at the business side as well, and the industries. And all this knowledge, as Chiara was mentioning at the end of her presentation, are going to be part of a knowledge base that is going to feed partially one of the outcomes of the DataBench project, which is the DataBench Toolbox. So this presentation is mostly about the tool that we are going to offer to everybody, because it will be open, and how this is organized, and what are the outcomes from the project that can be accessed via this tool that is a web-based toolbox. So toolbox means a box of tools, in a sense. So don't expect a single tool. We are giving access to different knowledge and different tools in order to be able to understand what is behind the scenes in this exercise of looking at the benchmarking world related to big data and AI. So first of all, just to look a little bit of at the context, this is the work packages of the project, but don't think about work packages, think about the functionality. The DataBench Toolbox is somehow in the middle because it's collecting all the knowledge and information that we are gathering into the project from different perspectives. On the one hand, we have a technical perspective, looking at the technical benchmarking initiatives, the metrics, and so on. But we have also, as I mentioned before, this business perspective, that was explained by Gabriela Cattaneo a month ago in another webinar that you can also see in our website. And we have these business performance use cases that Chiara was explaining before. And we have, of course, some technical evaluation of everything and relation with other initiatives. So everything is more or less somehow related to the toolbox because we aim to have this access via a single tool. So, but what is exactly the DataBench Toolbox? Our aim is to create a kind of one-stop shop for big data benchmarking. So the idea is offering the possibility of accessing different benchmarks that are out there, that sometimes are difficult to find unless you are a really expert guy that is dealing with this type of technologies and benchmarking initiatives. So we will have a kind of a catalog of different benchmarks that can be enlarged by what we call the benchmark providers, which is the first group of users that we have. So imagine that you are creating a new benchmark for a specific big data tool, database, wherever. So you would like to this benchmark to be also listed in this catalog. So we have some functionalities for these users to be able to include their own benchmark into our knowledge base, into our catalog. But the main users at the both that are in the middle of this slide, which are what we call the technical and the business users. Technical users are mostly people that would like to actually benchmark some of the tools, some big data solutions. So they are hoping to find some specific benchmark tool that would like to use to test some specific activities in their daily work. So they will be able to find the technical benchmark using the toolbox, while business users mostly, although let's say the line between these two sometimes is blurred, but in any case, business users are more interested in things such as the ones that Chiara was explaining before. They are most interested in finding new knowledge, finding information about lesson learned or what others are doing in the same type of business, trying to get some hints of KPIs, etc., etc. So those then the DataBench Toolbox should cater also for this type of users that are trying to organize this knowledge base that Chiara was mentioning in a way that can be managed by and used by both type of users. And last but not least, as we are in this landscape of projects that are belonging to the Big Data Value PPP, I think this is the natural playground for us to at least try to help these projects in their benchmarking task, and also to try at the same time to test our solutions using these projects. So if you are here and you belong to a project and you need something related to benchmarking, don't hesitate to talk to us because we can help you in order to do that. I don't plan to look at in detail to this because I know that it's very difficult to read. It's just for you to understand that we have a set of benchmarks that we are assessing for different type of criteria, mostly based on the right hand side. You have the BDV reference model, so it's mostly based on this particular architecture or reference model. So we categorize each of the benchmark in relation with this for different aspects related to the type of technology, such as machine learning or streaming, real-time, interactive, or the data type, if it is text, or if it is a graph database, or if it is image, audio, time series, etc. And also by sector, sector of application. So each of the benchmark categorized this in that way. And we are feeding the DataBench Toolbox with this type of information in order to be able to search benchmark by this criteria. So what is offered from the toolbox? The previous slide showed somehow the technical perspective, what are the benchmarks that are out there, but the toolbox gives access not only to that, a catalog of technical benchmark with some search functionality, but also some information about business performance benchmark, some hints about the usage of big data technologies in industries and use cases. In the end, everything is feeding this knowledge base. That is accessible via the toolbox, and also access to different tools, such as this self-assessment tool, which is a tool for companies to self-assess themselves in comparison to others in terms of what they are doing with big data technologies, or the project handbook that still is in progress, where we are going to have all the knowledge acquired during the project available for the users. So this toolbox also have some shortcuts. I will show you in the real demo in a while, and basically it's covering all these aspects. So let me show you briefly, because there is a glimpse, the actual web tool, which is the toolbox. So the toolbox is structured as a typical web page in the sense that you are able to navigate to this tool and then understand what is the toolbox. Even you have some videos to understand what can the toolbox do for you if you are a technical user, business user, and benchmark provider. You have also some type of user journeys for technical users, business user, or benchmark providers, and some shortcuts to some specific aspects or tools. For instance, we have a shortcut to the frequently asked questions, or to the self-assessment tool that I mentioned before, to the handbook, or even to the what we call the knowledge nugget catalog. These knowledge nuggets are nothing to do with chicken nuggets, as you can imagine. We call it this way because they are like small pieces of information that we believe are important to show. It's somehow the catalog of our knowledge base. When we talk about nuggets here, we talk about pieces of information, pieces of knowledge. So let me go very quickly because we don't have a lot of time to show you, for instance, a user journey for business users. This is still work in progress. I didn't mention that, but later I will show you more or less the timeline that we have for the toolbox. But we are trying to gather some guidelines on how to use the tool, very easy guidelines for different type of users. In this case, we are looking at the business user journey, and we are, of course, saying that technical and business perspective are often intervene, this fine line that are among them. But in any case, the idea is that in the toolbox, you will be able to find, if you are a business user, some specific aspects related to business, KPIs, etc., etc. And we have divided between, at least for the time being, between two types of users. Someone that is beginner in the sense that they didn't enter to the toolbox many times before, or they don't have a clear idea of what benchmarking can provide to them. And then we have some hints, and we will populate this with even more hints and lessons learned later, but in order for them to understand what they can do. An easy thing, of course, is going to the FAQ, to the frequently asked question page, which is also work in progress, but we have some still here to try to understand some of the concepts or ideas behind benchmarking. So you have a definition of what is benchmarking in big data, what is the definition, what we call use case, because use case can be a different thing in many different aspects. What is a business KPI? What are the type of business KPI we are looking at in DataBench? what is the DataBench Toolbox, etc., etc. Even you have access to the BDBA reference model with some explanation on how we use it in the scope of this project, and so on. You have even this matrix that I showed you before, and you will be able to go to some knowledge nugget where you can download this information in a way that you can actually look at it in depth, because the quality of the image is not so great for looking at this data, but if you download it, is easy to understand. So this is for a beginner. This is the first thing to do. But of course, going back to this business user journey, you have many other things to do. You can even type beginner in the search area and see what is for you there. You see there are some knowledge nuggets here for beginners that we think that are important. For instance, this first one gives access to 8 KPIs that we have selected in the project to measure the big data business impact. And you can see that these KPIs are revenue increase, profit increase, cost reduction, etc., etc. You have the definition that we are using, and even what are the way we are measuring these KPIs. This is important to understand later other information. That's why it's suggested for the beginners. But in here, of course, you have also related tags where you can navigate to others. So, for instance, if you are interested in these KPIs and you would like to see which ones are, for instance, qualitative business KPIs, you have some related nuggets that explain in detail what type of KPIs you can have a look at it. These, for instance, are the ones related to qualitative benchmarks by industry, and you can see for each of the industries, agriculture, financial services, healthcare, etc., there are some KPIs and some even use cases that are interesting for this type of industries. So this is an example of how you can navigate basically the different nuggets that you can have a look. And as you can see, there are many, and you can use them in very different ways. So this is mostly for the business user. I don't want to stay longer in this business user journey, but you have more information here on how to proceed. Of course, if you are a technical user, you would like to go to the technical shortcut, and you have a similar user journey, but more related to the specificities of the users. In this particular case, the technical user. So there are many options here, many recommendations on how to start for the beginner and for the advanced, even some information about how to configure and deploy and execute some of the selected benchmarks that we have integrated. I'm not going to go into the details on that, and if you're interested, we will have a virtual webinar also in the scope of BDBA in 1 month time, where we go in more details about this. But you can have access to many different aspects of the application, such as a guided search where you can, for instance, select I don't know, by different aspects and the processing type and search by this one. And you have not only the nuggets, but also from the technical perspective, you have access to a specific benchmark that are, and in this particular case, used for streaming, as I was searching before. And you can have a look at one example like this Yahoo streaming benchmark, where you have information about what this particular benchmark is about. You have a link to their own GitHub, so you can navigate to the actual tool, this Yahoo streaming benchmark. But in this particular case, this is a benchmark that we have integrated that you can, even if you are an expert user, you can even configure and download this and deploy this automatically from this page to your own infrastructure to try this and execute this particular benchmark. I'm not going into more details about that, but you have also the metrics and many information that you can find about each of the benchmarks. So you have the possibility of selecting some of the benchmarks that are interesting for your use. And that's basically it. So I don't want to go into many details. There are other tools, as I mentioned. There are other possibilities, not only the search. There are other type of search. There are ways of looking at the entire catalog of knowledge nuggets, the entire catalog of the technical benchmarks. It's different type of search, but I think you got an idea of what the database toolbox is about. So let me go back very quickly to the final slide. This is the calendar that we have for the DataBench Toolbox. We are here. We are near our final release version of the Toolbox, which will be at the end of next month. As you can see, the tool is available now. We are doing some fine tuning and of course, some collection of more content. As Chiara was saying, I didn't show, for instance, the blueprints, but there are some blueprints already there. But we need to categorize everything well and provide it in a way that the users find it attractive and easy to navigate with. So that's the work to be done during this month and also after the end of June. We will continue, of course, adding some more content, maybe correcting or improving some of the functionalities that we offer from the toolbox. But mostly we would like to do experiments, and by experiments we mean working with projects, working with you if you are interested in some aspect of this, in order to try the toolbox to help you on your benchmarking task, and trying to at the end of the day to have a very good tool that help the community to do benchmarking, which is what we would like to do, not only from the technical perspective but also from the business perspective, as we were mentioning. And that's all from my side. So you have the information, as Anna was mentioning. You can contact DataBench or directly to me or to some of my colleagues if you have any doubt about the toolbox. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you, Chiara. Now moving on to the Q&A, we have one question. This one is for Chiara. I'm going to read it. According to your use cases, by reducing the computational resources, you reduce the cost as well. But what is going on about the performance in any case? What is the trade-off?
Well, this is a very good question. We, well, first of all, you might have noted that when the machine is less powerful, has less memory, for example, or less vCPUs, we use a greater number of machines. So in terms of overall power of the architecture, we try to make them comparable. But that's about it. What we did not do in the use case I showed is you know, the usual latency versus throughput curves, you know, to show that the overall architecture really had a similar behavior with the different configurations. Now that requires technical benchmarking. And that is also what we're trying to do in selected use cases in the upcoming months. So I hope this answers your question. Okay.
Okay, that's the only question we had. So thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned in the beginning, we will send this material and it will be also available in our website, YouTube, SlideShare, and social media accounts very, very soon. Thank you so much again, and we hope to see you again on the virtual workshop with BDBA in 1 month.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
And thank you to all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.